Hey, TJI listeners, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now YouTube.
Please like us, subscribe, and leave some comments. We want to know what you like, what you want to hear more about, where we're going.
Hello, listeners. We are back again with another Redux episode. This one is Waco, the Fiery End.
We had so many stories to tell about Waco that we broke it into three. If you listened to last week, you heard the beginning of this with that super intense, deadly raid that started this thing where you had federal agents killed and Branch Davidians killed and all that. But that set off a siege that didn't end for 51 days. This episode, the one you're about to hear, is going to tell the backstory on how I came to be there at the end. Only a handful of us, maybe 5 people were there, news people there when it started. But it's a story that even if you heard it before, you may want to hear it again. And for a lot of you who are just finding our podcast now, we aired this, I think it was the 3rd episode over a year ago. So we think you'll enjoy it.
I think it was about noon. Somebody from upstairs yelled, "The building's on fire." All of a sudden, all of this smoke came down this outside of the building. And when it got to the hole, it got sucked in and everything turned black. I'd have probably been burned to death, except that people behind me further into the building started screaming.
April 19th, 1993. The siege at Mount Carmel is about to come to an end, a fiery end. Richard Ray takes us through that fateful day.
It was a Friday, 48 days into this thing, and Satellite City cleared out. Everybody was convinced it was never going to end, and they all went home. So it's Sunday afternoon, and I'm fishing on Lake Louisville Lake, where Brian and I used to fish a lot. We haven't fished much there lately, but I'm fishing with my oldest boy. He was about, 15, 16. And my pager goes off. Now, for young people, they may not even know what a pager is, but we didn't have cell phones. If they wanted to get a hold of you, you had a pager, and your pager would buzz. I think at that time it had a message on it, call the station or whatever. So we reeled in. It was an urgent call from the news director, MS. And I was to call him, and I called him. And he said, "I need you and Max down there right now. Get down to Waco. Get down to the hotel." He said, "Something's going to happen tomorrow morning. I need you there at 4 a.m. in the morning." And I'm saying, okay. And all the time I'm thinking, yeah, right. Something's going to happen. We'd been told that for 50 days, and nothing ever happened. Nobody ever came out. So I did what I was told. I went home and I had a go bag, and I grabbed my go bag, and I got with my photographer, Max Stacy, guy I worked with a lot. I think it was Max. And yeah, it was Max. And we get down there and get in our hotel room and get our, and we're both really skeptical. Like, I can't believe they sent us down here. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow morning. But we went to the Whataburger, which was open 24 hours at 4 o'clock in the morning, got a couple of taquitos and something to go, and went back out to the empty Satellite City where there were just 2 other photographers and 1 other reporter. And sure enough, we're doing a live shot, 6 o'clock in the morning with the Dallas TV station. And the tanks are rolling, knocking holes in the wall, and inserting gas. Now, this caught everybody. We got our butts kicked in the beginning of the story, but we were kicking major butt now, right? It's like a football game. If you don't win, if you're not number 1, if you're not getting good numbers, then they're going to hire a new news director or a new football coach. So yeah, there was pressure always to get the story first, and maybe not always get the story right, but because there was pressures, as we heard in the last episode, I was actually pressured to tell something I didn't believe was true. But we were down there, and this started, and we're like, holy moly. I mean, they are literally, it was 2 miles away, but we had long lens cameras. You could see these tanks. You can see the video now if you want to get on Google and pull it up. They're pulling up, the tanks knock holes in the wall, and then they're inserting this tear gas. And there's a lot of, the FBI's got a bunch of people out there. DOJ's got a bunch of people out there. Well, we got the story, and and Waco's not an easy place to get to, even from Dallas. I mean, it's a 2.5-hour drive. So it took virtually, 3 or 4 hours before anybody else even started to show up. And we had the story to ourselves, and it was a pretty dramatic story.
No one else was there from other stations?
There was a CBS correspondent, Vicki Mabry, her photographer, myself, my photographer, and a photographer from Channel 5 who was a friend of Vicki Mabry's, but had been told you can't tell NBC where we got this tip. And again, we're going to make people wait until the next episode to tell how that all shook out. But now the story's on. I was told to go down there because they got this tip. And I was told initially, we got a tip that something big is going to happen tomorrow morning. That's all I was really told. So the story starts to develop. By late morning, they're having news conferences in Waco. So I think it was either Brett Shipp or Barbara White was in Waco reporting on that. So I actually ended up doing what amounted to a 14-hour live shot from 6 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, with a break while they went to Waco for the newscast. And Barbara was out there helping me. And she would give me a break every once in a while because I needed it. It was a, if you see the video or pictures of me or whatever, it was a sunny day, but the wind was just blowing really, and which contributed to the fire spreading so fast. The wind was blowing. Fortunately, it was blowing straight at me because I needed a haircut, but my hair was going straight back and I actually looked pretty good. And, but so yeah, the story's on, right? And I don't know how fast you want to jump ahead, but it's noon. Right? We're on the noon newscast. I'm live with Walter Evans.
Let me stop. You were there at 6 a.m. and you saw tanks. When you got there, you got a setup, and you have basically, you're looking at a camera and you have the compound in the background. So you're not looking at it directly while you're doing your live shot. And you're getting ready. Did you do a morning show, or is it just getting ready for the noon show?
It was a continuous live shot from 6 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night.
Because now the FBI has run out of patience, or whatever the reason, this was the day they're going to put an end to the siege.
Right.
So they got tanks poking holes and all that. You're facing the camera, the compound's behind you. Pick it up from there.
That's a good question because I really couldn't see that much. Viewers, and I told viewers this repeatedly, I was really good on that live shot. I was on my game that day. And one of the things I continually told viewers is you've actually got a better view than I do because you're seeing the camera. The monitor I'm looking at is backlit and I can see it, but you're getting a better view of this than I am. So I was really watching it like the viewer you're right. What's happening is behind me, I'm facing the camera, but I've got a monitor right by the camera that I can see what's going on.
Do you have somebody in your ear talking to you from the station?
Yes, and that was standard operating procedure. We called it IFB, interrupted feedback. Is that whatever IFB stands for? I would have a earphone in my right ear, which is one of the reasons my right ear is totally deaf now, from years of covering really loud conventions and stuff and cranking it up so I could hear them talking to me from Dallas. But on that IFB, you didn't want them talking to you while you were talking. But if there was a break, if the anchor person in Dallas was, and they had people on the set in Dallas, it was a Q&A basically. I'm in the field, Walter's on the set. Later it was Julie Summers and Dale Shornack, I think, for most of the afternoon.
Legends, both of them.
Yeah, and they were getting information. So I'd talk for a little bit, then they say, well, Rich, we just got this from the AP, and then they would add something to the story, and then they would ask me a question. So it was pretty interesting, dramatic television. We didn't run out of things to say.
Interactive between the station and you actually on the site.
Right. We just got this video in, and then I could see, because back then it was not simultaneous, but with HD, there's like a 7-second gap now. So you can't really use a monitor in the field now with HD TV, which is another story. But at that time, it was just a second or two gap.
So you're not seeing real time.
But just a second or two off. Okay. So it was good enough that you could kind of see what was going on.
And you said you're putting footage on the air, whatever.
Right.
That's where I come in. That was my job as an editor. I was at the station. I wasn't there at 6, but I was there a couple hours before the noon show to help. That was one of the jobs, turn around that video. Producers would say, we need the gunshots, we need this, we need that, to support what you were doing. So now you're live, continuously interactive with the anchors. It's getting toward noon. Then that's when our show comes up. So pick it up.
Well, they were still doing live broadcast, but then they roll the open for the noon newscast. And Walter Evans, who was kind of the Walter Cronkite of Channel 4 for many years, wonderful, great old anchor man, passed away a few years ago. I loved Walter. But he and I are on the air 7 minutes after noon. The fire starts. I mean, they've been knocking holes and they're getting increasingly impatient. You can see that. And then all of a sudden the fire starts. And then for years, we're still arguing today about how that fire started. And we can talk about that during this session. But then the fire started, and then it got really dramatic because you could see somebody running and jumping off the roof. You could see the flame suddenly. I mean, the flame, this is horrific. And all the time, we're keeping in mind that there's kids in there. There's dozens of children and women in there. It's not just Koresh. It's all these people, all God's people are in there. And this fire is so horrific. How can anybody survive it? And in fact, only a handful of people did.
So I was at the station. I was actually in editing, watching carefully. I was watching that shot, and I saw the flames coming out of a window. And our expectation was that, okay, there's a fire. They're going to come pouring out. No one did.
No one did.
No one did. So if you're...
Well, I should say no one. A couple did.
A couple did, yeah.
There were like 4, 5, 6 maybe that came out. I should know that, but I don't.
A couple of adults, a couple of kids, something like that. But all the people in there didn't come pouring out, even though the place was on fire. So if you're doing a live shot, you're looking at a camera, who told you it was on fire?
I could see that.
You could see that?
I could see in the monitor, and I turned around, and by that time, the fire was so huge, you could see it from 10 miles away.
Okay, all right.
It was just very quickly from coming out a window or two. And again, the government report concluded that it was started in 2 or 3 different places. And that's kind of the way I saw it. It looked like it sort of simultaneously started in 3 separate locations their argument has always been that, and they claim they have audio tape. I've listened to the audio tape, and it's kind of hard to make out, but you can make an argument that Koresh and his people are talking about pouring gasoline on the bales. But this is all later. We don't know this at this point. All we know is there's this horrendous fire and what is going to happen to those women and children and men in there too. And it was horrific. I mean, and the other thing that really struck me, and maybe we'll save this for hot takes too, but it was like they were unprepared for this to happen. We kept waiting and waiting and waiting for fire trucks to show up. And I looked at some of this the other day, and I did this with a documentary I did for the 10th anniversary. We're like, where are the fire trucks?
That's what I always wondered.
It was like they had no expectation there was going to be a fire or anything go wrong. There was no... I mean, there may have been, there were ambulances that came, as I recall, fairly quickly. But it seemed like it took forever for a fire truck to get there. And then I remember them being, where are they going to get water? It was a disaster.
You're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. It was.
So my view of it, I saw the flames from that window. And yes, it looked like separate fires in that complex to me.
Yeah.
Looking at the video, there was a really good wide shot of the whole complex. And because of the wind and the fact that it looked like fire started in different sections, it accelerated quickly.
Oh, it went up.
It was amazing.
Like a torch.
But they fired tear gas. So one thing I always wondered, they fired tear gas in there, and they said it was non-incendiary tear gas. Why didn't that flush the people out? That's what I always wondered.
I got 2 points on that.
Okay.
I reported repeatedly that the FBI tells us they are firing in non-incendiary tear gas. Later government report came out that it was incendiary tear gas. That came out later, much later, that it was. At least some of the tear gas canisters were.
But at the time...
At the time we were reporting this tear gas is not going to start a fire. And that went on. And then you're right. You and everybody watching was, when are the kids going to come out? When are the women going to come out? And they, other than a couple of adult males and maybe one woman, I don't remember exactly, but there were only 5 or 6 people that survived that. Koresh had, as I recall, they had a bus buried underneath the main building or somewhere on the complex, and he actually sent the women and children down into the bus. I mean, it's horrific when you get into the details, and I'm going to let our listeners, if you want to get deeper into the gory details of that, but all those people died. And to this day, we don't know exactly how many children. We've got a pretty good number. I wrote this down somewhere here.
Well, I'm just looking on the internet that 9 people escaped.
Right.
The rest died.
And they all went on trial, by the way, which I covered about a year later in San Antonio.
Really?
Yeah, they were all charged with various crimes, and they were all convicted. I think one of them, one of the females sort of turned state's evidence and got a lighter sentence or probation or something. But yeah, the rest were all convicted. But yeah, there was, as I recall, I know I've written this down, the total number of people that died in this thing.
75.
75, but they don't know how many of them were children. There may have been as many as 44 children.
So the conclusion with this is they set the fire, or the feeling, I don't know how you reported this, it was almost suicide. It was almost a Jim Jones, because there were some bodies inside who were deceased from gunshots.
Right. In fact, Koresh had been preaching that long before the raid, he'd been telling his followers that they were going to be attacked by the government and it was all going to be a fiery end. I mean, he was prophetic. He called it. And so did that lead him to order the people to pour gasoline on the hay bales? I don't know. That argument will continue for eternity.
How long did the fire burn?
It was a smoking rubble within half an hour. I mean, the entire complex.
And the complex was constructed mostly of wood.
Yeah, it was really poorly constructed. I mean, even if you watch the gunfight, I mean, they're shooting bullets are coming through the wall
it's
like
coming
it's
through
going
like
through
it's
butter,
nothing.
you know?
So poorly constructed, a lot of wood, some accelerant used, high winds. That went up like a matchstick. So you're recording. What were your thoughts as you were recording it? How did that work with the anchors back in Dallas?
Well, the anchors were asking me. They were saying that pretty early on, the FBI was saying that the Branch Davidian started the fire, and it started in different places at the same time. And I said, I'm 2 miles away, but yeah, it did look like it started in at least 2 different places on different ends of the building.
And you have to take their word for it.
Yeah, and you're taking, basically, reporters are often blamed for reporting accurately what authorities tell them, but is not the truth. I mean, we can only report what they were telling us and what our own eyes saw.
Curious.
And that's
a good point.
all I could do. And I was kind of sick to my stomach the whole time thinking about, I think everybody was.
I was in Dallas looking.
What's happening to those children? They've got to get them out of there. And
I'll tell you, I watched the whole thing in between having to actually cut tape together to air, and I go, where are the people? Yeah. Why aren't people coming out? And I heard this too, this totally just conspiracy theory stuff.
Right.
Because they didn't come out. And with tear gas, you always see shots of tear gas going into buildings and people, they come out choking, but they'd come out.
Right.
So for this one, somebody said, I'll bet you he had an underground tunnel and they escaped out the back. They wouldn't intentionally burn themselves.
I don't think he necessarily intentionally sent the children and the women into that bus to, I don't know. But again, the government says they have these audio tapes, and I've listened to them, And their interpretation is this is Koresh and his people talking about pouring gasoline, about intentionally setting the fire. And people will argue about if that's what they're really saying. It's not like you and I talking and we're hearing exactly what everybody is saying. But again, it fits the narrative that Koresh had been telling his people forever. They're going to attack us. And the other part of the narrative is, I'm going to be resurrected. I'm going to come back. And I went down there and did stories on the year anniversary and the 5-year anniversary and the 10-year anniversary. And you still had surviving cult members who maybe came out early in the raid who were still saying he's going to come back. They thought he was going to be resurrected.
And that's that cult mentality. I mean, where they become Jesus, they become the savior.
And again, to the average person, to hear the message he was preaching is, how could people fall for this? But these were not stupid people. There were lawyers and educated people. These people really believed that he had the answers and only he had the right answers, which is another key thing about a cult. You can say this about some churches too, where they say, everybody else has got it wrong. We're the only ones that got it right.
We got it right.
But with a cult, virtually, it's always the leader has the answers. He's our ticket to heaven. He's got the answers. And that's how they exert control.
Now, since they had all these weapons, did you witness any explosions from ammo or anything like secondary explosions?
There were bursts of, I don't know if you'd call them explosions, but yeah, if you watch the tape, and again, conspiracy theorists will take that same tape that we aired, that was airing on TV, and they'll find these little things. But the video back then it's not HD video. You could, the light shining here and there. There could be just sunlight reflecting off a window and stuff, and they would run with that as if this is evidence that this has happened. I can't say for sure what happened. All I can say is it did appear to me that the fire started in more than one place at the same time, or pretty simultaneously.
It looked that way to me too, from a distance, but I had that same shot. But then I wondered about the weapons. How come there's no explosions? Why aren't people fleeing tear gas? Now, I'm going to go back to this whole David Koresh, Branch Davidians, which I heard is still in Waco.
This is quite a story too, and I have not been out there for several years. But again, on the 10th year anniversary, there's a constant battle over who owns that land. At least there was as of the 10th anniversary. And again, I haven't been back there.
Mount Carmel.
Mount Carmel, and who really owns it. And it's been a changing cast of characters. The last time I was out there was a whole different guy who was claiming he was the guy and he controlled it. And you still had some of the original Clive Doyle, I think his name was. He was a postal worker from Australia. He's one of the guys that survived, went to prison afterwards. He was still living in a mobile home on the property. He was not part of the group that was claiming to run it and own it at that time. But there's been, over the years, it started before Koresh got there, and it's continued after he left. It's a pretty small group the last time I was there. And again, that would have been quite a while ago. But there was still this continuing battle over who owned the property. A lot of it was still just rubble. They'd put up a few new buildings and this and that. But it's still there. People still go there. Didn't you say you talked to somebody that was there recently?
Yeah, I talked to a 19-year-old student, university student, who said, yeah, I just went to the Branch Davidians. And then she said, but I'm not a cult member, but I was curious. So that story spreads far and wide. I still can't figure out, maybe you can add some clarity to this. Why did a cult, David Koresh, who is quoting from the Bible and considers himself a savior, why did they need that kind of arsenal? What were they attempting to do?
I think part of it is, and I could be wrong on this, and viewers or listeners want to correct me on this, but I think part of it was that they were gathering weapons because, again, he was preaching that they were going to be attacked, that the government was going to come after them. He was preaching this long before the siege happened. He was prophetic on a lot of things, which adds another eerie layer to this whole really crazy, terrible, tragic story.
So, and then you said there was an informant, and that's how the government had got on their radar. Why would somebody infiltrate that, and what happened to that person?
Well, the ATF sent this guy in, and I think from what I've read and seen, they figured out pretty early this guy was not for real. He went in there saying, "Oh, I'm interested in this. I want to be part of this." His name was Robert Rodriguez, as I recall, and he was in the compound that morning. And again, we'll talk about this more in the next episode. But they had been tipped off that the government was, and it wasn't John McLemore and his photographer that tipped him off. It was another photographer who had gotten a similar tip, and I think it came through an ambulance employee or something that had been told to be on standby. And he was out trying to find it because it's a hard place to find. It was out in the middle of nowhere. And he stopped to ask directions from a postal delivery guy, a guy who delivered a mail in rural area. And he's asking directions for this Branch Davidian compound. Well, it turned out to be that postal guy was part of the Branch Davidian cult. And that's what really tipped them off.
So then he told.
Then he went back, but Robert Rodriguez was in there that morning, and he knew that they knew the ATF was coming, and he went back to his. They were set up at a house, I think.
So he left the compound.
Left the compound, went back to his superiors who were running the raid, and said, "You can't." This all came out in congressional hearings a year or so later. He said, you got to call the raid off. They know you're coming. They got a lot of guns. You got to call it off. And they insisted on going ahead with it. And that's what started the siege, which we talked in length about last podcast.
Because they collected all these officers. They had their bulletproof vests. They had their guns, the vehicles. They were going to do it. We're going to do it. We got to go on this.
Yep.
So those people that were convicted, sent to jail, that were originally in the siege building, in that building, where are they now?
Most of them, they got sentences, as I recall, and please correct me on this, listeners. As I recall, they were 6 or 7 year sentences, and I don't think they served a full sentence, but they were federal sentences. And by the time the 10th year anniversary came out, and I think his name was Clive Doyle. He was a really, really pleasant, intelligent Australian man. He was part of my interview inside. He'd been in prison. He was out, still believed that Koresh was going to come back and that kind of stuff. And in fact, I think he lost a daughter and a granddaughter or a grandchild in the fire. But they did spend some time in prison, but it wasn't, they're not in prison now.
So you interviewed him in prison or when he got out?
After he got out. And I again, as I recall, he might have got a 7 year sentence. And again, this I don't recall. It's been, how many years ago now?
Yeah.
30 plus. As I recall, it was a 6 or 7 year sentence, and I don't think he served the whole 6 or 7 years. By the 5th anniversary, he was probably out.
Did he enlighten you about anything, or it's just still going with the Branch Davidian line?
Yeah, he's still towing the company line, despite the fact that he'd lost close family in this thing to this. The thing about people who are conned by con men is they're the last ones that want to admit they've been conned because it's embarrassing.
It is.
When they look at it and they say, how could I have swallowed this line of nonsense? That's embarrassing. So they're so reluctant to admit they've been conned. And I think that was with some of them at least. And I think you see that today.
Right. Did you ever witness bodies being recovered?
The body bags, you could see them. They had body bags, as I recall. And again, it's been over 30 years, so my recall is not 100%. But yeah, there were lines of body bags, and there were ambulances going out without sirens or lights because nobody on the ambulance was alive. And there were a lot of bodies in that bus, again, as I recall, that I don't know. It took months for them to identify, and they still really don't know the total number of people.
Explain
as I know.
The bodies in the bus. There was a non-working bus outside.
They had buried it.
They buried it.
And again,
I think that's where the conspiracy theory about the tunnels came in.
Yeah. They did have, as I recall, and again, we'll do a follow-up on this if my recollection is faulty after 30 plus years. But as I recall, there was an underground bus that they had buried. And again, I believe that they had sent the children and the women down there maybe with gas masks, with the, so a lot of the bodies were like so burned beyond recognition, and I don't know how much DNA testing, but all of that went to the Tarrant County. That was part of the story that went on for months afterwards, as they tried to really tally up how many people had died and identify as many as they could. But the fire just was so horrific that they were all cremated, basically.
Did they ever find David Koresh or identify him?
I don't recall that. I think they probably, if they didn't, they could have with DNA potentially. But again, he was pretty badly wounded. If you see the video, if you ever get a chance to see the video that he sent out, it's pretty compelling stuff.
I did, because I had to curate all that video. And I've seen that the initial gunfight hundreds and hundreds of times, and the fire. So how long were you there reporting? When did it end? What's the end game for coverage?
Well, that day, we took a break at 7 o'clock and they went back to programming. And then I was back on the air again at 10 o'clock for the 10 o'clock news, which was all about Waco. And then for days after that, again, it was the siege and the fire went 51 days. The coverage went another, I don't know how many days, but it was more than a week that I was down there. And then periodically something would happen and you'd go down there again, maybe a year later. The 7 or 8 guys that, and there was at least one woman that had escaped, went on trial in San Antonio, federal court. And so I covered that. And so the story went on, and it goes on today with debate among conspiracy theorists about what really happened. It's been, there have been scripted TV shows about Waco that were very good. The documentary that Netflix did a little while ago, and again, John McLemore was part of that, and he and I approached the same production company. They were very interested in the story, but at least Netflix didn't take it. Maybe somebody else will down the road, but it's still a story that demands attention today, and it led to so much more. And again, not this episode, but a couple episodes down, we're going to talk about what happened 1 year later to the day in Oklahoma City, and it happened because of what happened in Waco.
What's coming up next?
I'm going to fill in the blanks about why this really happened. This is a story I have actually pitched to production companies in London, a couple of them, and they are very interested, and also a production company here. I don't know if I'll ever get it commissioned, but it is the untold stories of Waco, why the ATF did what it did, how this whole thing destroyed the careers of these 2 brave TV reporter and photographer who risked their lives to help save some of these ATF guys, and how they were so badly treated by the ATF and then backstabbed by other reporters, how it destroyed their career. There's untold stories to this. How I became one of only 4 people down there, 3 photographers, 2 reporters on the morning this started, why everybody else was gone, who got the tip, how they got the tip. That's a hell of a story.
I cannot wait to hear.
Okay, that was pretty interesting. And I mentioned in the podcast episode we did that I was at the station and I watched it on TV. It was pretty unusual, I'll tell you that.
Just nothing like it. I mean, you say you think you've seen everything in the news business, but I think all of us sat there during that whole 51-day siege and fiery end. And what is this? These kind of things just don't happen. And it did.
So it was like a movie, but it wasn't a movie. It was real life, and you just can't explain what you're watching. So anything to add to this? Anything you're doing with this, or?
Yeah, in fact, I am still continuing to push in my documentary efforts a number of ideas about, there are untold stories, and that's the one we're going to run next week, is the 3rd in this series that we did. There, as much as there's been done on this, and you've seen scripted, you've seen documentary, and they've been really good programs on Netflix and in other places, but there are still untold stories about Waco 33 years later. And that's what we talk about next week.
Until then, we will talk to you later.